Hi, I'm Ryan Davis,
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
and this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
Is seat taken?
Hey, Kiernan.
Oh, Ryan, I'm so excited to hear an interview that you've done today. I'm thrilled.
I know I made it easy for you. You know, you just have to show up, and I'm going to do all the work as usual, folks.
We did once have a listener write in that said, "Does Ryan's back hurt from having to carry the show?" And I just put it right in the trash.
Yeah,
Right in the
my
trash.
mom is a big fan of the show.
Ryan, so what are you talking about today?
So today we've got Hannah Sampson. She's with the Washington Post, and we're talking to her about over-tourism, something that she has covered quite a bit for the Post. And, it's a great conversation.
Long-awaited episode. We've been talking about over-tourism on so many of the places that we've covered in the last 45 episodes.
Yeah, we've over-discussed it without diving in. So
That's
this
right.
is a great
This
time
is the deep
to...
dive, and she is an expert on it.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
so what kind of topics are you going to hit?
I mean, we're going to talk about over-tourism. We're going to talk about what it is, when did it start to matter. We're going to talk about ways that you can avoid over-tourism and how you can be a better tourist.
And have you ever visited a place that felt kind of over-touristed?
Yeah, well, I live in New York City.
Well, sure.
Uh,
I have a feeling Bushwick isn't there yet, though. But maybe Williamsburg.
It's funny. We actually talk a little bit about Bushwick and about Williamsburg because these are neighborhoods that are experiencing more tourism than they ever have before. But I wouldn't say it's over tourism yet. But there are places in Manhattan that you go where if you
just
go on like
mobs.
a Friday or Saturday, it's like New York is full. You can't
Yeah.
you can't eat, you can't go see a show, you can't go see a movie.
Yeah.
To make plans like weeks in advance. Not great.
I remember really thinking deeply about over-tourism in the context of Zion National Park in Utah.
Right. Yeah.
Because you have to take a bus to get into the park to get further onto the most
Sure.
desirable areas and hikes. And, relatively few buses are running, and the local community likes to use the park as well they should.
Right.
But that huge onrush of the local community, along with being a popular tourist spot, it meant that you could spend an hour and a half waiting to get on a bus just to get inside the park. And this is an area that's supposed to belong to all of us. And so how do you strike that right balance? I'm going to be anxious to hear what Hannah Sampson has to say.
And I bring that up just for you. I bring up your interest in keeping national parks available for everybody. Equitable. You
No,
believe in the equitable.
I do, absolutely.
yeah.
They're of the people and they're for the people.
So one of the things that Donald Trump did today is that he decided to overhaul the endangered species protections.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, so maybe this will mean you can just take you can just climb on like an oil rig and it'll just take you to a national park, or right? I mean, this is going to be a way to deal with over-tourism by making places less
You
beautiful.
do know oil rigs aren't types of transportation? That's
It's not a big... oh, wait, no, oil rigs like those things that sit.
yeah, that's the
I meant like a tanker, like an oil tanker.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, so you're saying like kind of
Yeah.
get on an oil tanker, head into Glacier Bay, Alaska, and just watch the bald eagles while spraying petroleum
Right.
onto the glaciers.
But also maybe in the future, Donald Trump will actually make, because America will just be a bunch of oil rigs, he will actually make those their national parks.
Well, he has tried to open protected lands to oil exploration, so we are very close to that.
But
It just seems
nobody
like,
even thinks about what happens when all the oil is gone, and you can just turn that area into just an inhabitable park. Just tumbleweeds blowing around, just dust, and let the kids play. I think that's
Well, Ryan, we've really veered off because I remember when I was first pitching you a podcast idea, I said let's do hot political takes, and you said no, and so we ended on tourism. So that's where we are today. Yeah.
So we can't talk anymore about the Endangered Species Act.
No, we're dead.
All right, but Teddy would have supported it. That's all I'm saying.
He didn't like to go by Teddy. He liked to go by Theodore.
Theodore.
Yes, and when he was little, people called him TD.
Well, TD, we've got a big announcement today.
That's true. We do have a big announcement. Follow up to the last time we said this big announcement. So it's slightly smaller because people already know who are regular listeners. This week, today, very day. No, it's a week old.
Yeah, it's true.
It's a week old.
It launched last. Yes.
This very day marks the week anniversary of the launch of outofofficepod.com.
load up your web browser, get out there and,
You
and
gotta
just
get
check
it.
out.
You could see it on Safari. You
Yeah,
could see it on Firefox. You could see it on
Chrome.
Chrome.
Yeah,
You could see it on
Netscape. If you
Net
have a really old
yeah,
computer and you had a
that's true.
Netscape, yeah, you could
Or
probably.
you yourself are very old.
Yeah, you can if AOL has a browser. I don't see why not. You can't try that
I
one.
feel like AOL must have had a browser, right?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, we want any way that you can check out outofofficepod.com for all the latest episodes and all the old episodes. Basically, all the
Oh,
episodes.
AOL Explorer, of course.
Yeah, Internet
Yeah.
Explorer, of course. Yeah, who could forget?
So, Ryan, when people go to outofofficepod.com, they're going to see, snapshots of you and me, including when we visited Sagamore Hill together, Theodore Roosevelt's home. They're going to get pen portraits, descriptions of each of the episodes, along with links of everything we talked about, and you can listen to the episodes right there. Great way to share it with your friends. Outofofficepod.com.
Outofofficepod.com.
Now, I think that's enough dilling and dallying. I think it's time to get to your over tourism interview with Washington Post's Hannah Sampson.
It's time to take off.
Tell the cabin crew.
Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff, please.
We welcome Hannah Sampson to Out of Office. Hannah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So we're going to jump right in and talk about over tourism. It's something that we talk a lot about on the show. But when did this become sort of a recognized problem?
I would say that in the academic community, people have been paying attention to this for a long time. Like sustainability experts, scholars have known that this was an issue, but I don't think it's been getting a lot of like public attention. It hasn't been getting widespread awareness from the general population of travelers and media. I would say until the last few years, 3 or 4 years, you really have seen it, bubble up to be part of a global conversation. And I would say even travel companies are talking about it now in ways that they weren't, even, I would say just like 5 years ago. So, we have seen it some factors that kind of forced it into the public conversation, like protests in Spain or in Venice, where people felt like their way of life was really being damaged because of too many too many tourists, the type of tourism they were getting. So I think just some public backlash to rising visitor numbers has really forced the public and the travel industry to take a closer look at the issue.
And what are some of the specific problems that we see in places like Venice with over tourism?
I mean, it's just like numbers, a numbers game, man. There are so many people crowding into small places that the locals complain that they can't live a normal life anymore, and that their infrastructure can't handle it. So Venice, of course, is a special example because of the water and because of the kind of fragile ecosystem there. But even places like Iceland or Amsterdam, uh, it's just that people who live there feel like they're being priced out of their homes. They feel like they can't enjoy their roads. Their shops are either closing in order to reopen to cater to tourists, or they're packed with tourists and they can't, go to the market on Sunday and get their groceries. So it's really a quality of life issue for locals and an infrastructure problem for governments. Like there are roads, pathways, parks that can't handle the numbers, and there's not really resources to um, address those problems.
So about 5 years ago, then people start talking about this. And are there some factors that have, caused this to become more of a problem in recent years?
More people are traveling. Like um, I see a lot of fingers get pointed at low cost airlines, and I think that's a big factor because global travel has become more democratized. It's easier and more affordable than ever to go from point A to point B, thanks to like the Spirit Airlines or the Ryanairs of the world, um, which just means that many more people are taking advantage of that and traveling. The middle class is There's an emerging middle class in countries around the world. So you have way more travelers coming out of China now. You have more travelers coming out of India. You have more travelers in the United States going around the world. So just again, the sheer numbers game of it. And then you have like the Airbnbs of the world where there are suddenly new options that might be cheaper than a hotel, that might feel a lot more comfortable for travelers. Um, so, kind of between having more places to stay that may be more affordable, having more affordable ways to get there, and having more people with resources around the world, all of those things kind of combine to give you numbers that are even outpacing what what global travel experts had been expecting. I don't remember off the top of my head what the number was for 2018 in terms of global international arrivals, but whatever it was more than what was expected. It beat the expectation by several years.
Do you think that, so on this podcast, we try to highlight places that people don't go all the time. We try not to, not that our download numbers would help contribute to this problem, but we try not to, give people the ways, the obvious sort of recommendations. Do you think though that travelers should feel bad about going to Venice or going to these cities that are struggling with over tourism?
I think the time to feel bad about it is if you're going and you're being obnoxious, or if you're going and you're not being cognizant of the issue. So if you're just like waltzing around drunk, you know, tripping people who live there and um, stopping traffic for selfies, then yeah, you should feel bad for that because you're being a jerk. But I think if you're trying to go to these places respectfully, aware of the problem, maybe you're going like slightly off peak time, so you're trying to schedule your trip so you're not with everybody else, um, contributing to huge crowds. No, you don't. I don't think you need to feel bad. I think there are ways to even go to some of the most popular places in the world uh, without being a jerk about it and without having to feel super guilty. Because a lot of them do have tourism economies, so they do depend on your money. It's just, can you do it in a way that's respectful and not like not damaging to the people who live there and to the infrastructure and to the environment.
And you mentioned going at off peak times. Do you have sort of other tips, both how somebody who's traveling can avoid, having their experience ruined by a place that's too crowded, and also, I guess, tips on how you can be sort of a better tourist in over touristed areas?
Yes. In fact, I wrote a whole story about this, and a lot of smart people um, gave me suggestions that I hadn't even thought of.
Oh,
So,
great.
I mean, like one of the main things, just like in the planning phase, is to really think about like if you have a bucket list, and is your bucket list the same as everyone else's bucket list? Like, do you need to go, um, whatever, to the Eiffel Tower, or do you need to go to this particular fjord or whatever? Think about if you really have a connection or want to have a connection to a place that everyone else is also trying to have a connection to. And if you do, okay, move forward. But consider if you really need to go to all of these places, that especially ones that are fragile. So that's kind of the first thing. We mentioned going at an off-peak time. So that could even be fall. If you're thinking about going to Europe in the summer, maybe think about going in fall if you
It
don't have
seems a little
kids,
hot to go to Europe the
especially
summer
this
these days.
summer. Yeah. I mean, we've been talking about this at the office, but like, under what circumstances fall not an ideal time to travel? Probably like only if you have kids in school who you can't take out of school, but otherwise, great time to go, less crowded, a little cooler. Um, there are some uh, there are some websites. I found one called Avoid Crowds that actually kind of crunches all of the available data they can find about like holidays and school vacations and events that are going on in cruise ship timings. Uh, so you can find out if the place where you're thinking about going is going to be super packed at the time when you're thinking about going. And if if you're flexible, then you can kind of try out a few dates and see, okay, well, maybe I'll schedule my trip for, this time of year because there isn't so much else going on that's going to make it overcrowded. Better experience for you, the tourist, better experience for the people who live there. So I guess like using the information that's out there to not just say like I'm going to go in the fall, but also try to be a little more targeted about when you're visiting. And then I mentioned the Eiffel Tower, but if you are going to Paris and you know you want to see the Eiffel Tower, also think about where else you can go that's not obvious. So I guess do a little research, try to see what places you can go to that are not on every top 10 list. Um, a lot of destinations are trying to offer information about areas like corners of their cities that are undiscovered that could use a little more traffic. So that's always a good way to kind of spread the wealth around. I found that the Vienna Tourist Board, is has been doing some stuff to try to help tourists avoid must-see lists, but also discover interesting corners of the city.
You can see how that could cause they issue a new list and then that list becomes
It's a
over tourist.
it's a vicious circle. It could be. A couple other things people had mentioned to me were think about not going with a giant group of people because anytime you show up with 20 other people, you're probably going to overwhelm whatever store or restaurant or attraction you're wandering into. So just think small when you're traveling. Even if you're with a big group, maybe you can break up into smaller groups just to keep the flow going. And think about hiring local guides who who know the schedule, the ebbs and flows of a place, who could use the money that you're going to put in their pocket, and can also give you a much better sense of what a destination is like from a local's perspective. Um, I think we mentioned Airbnb, and it's not universally beloved in every destination. In fact, it's against the law in some cities.
Right.
So it's a good idea to, as much as possible, figure out if where you're going has really strict laws on Airbnb. And if they do, it's probably because there's a housing shortage and they're trying to keep locals from being priced out of their apartments. So try to be respectful of that. If you can, try not to stay in an unregulated Airbnb or an Airbnb where it's really supposed to be off limits.
And you mentioned cruise ships. So I understand that one of the causes of this is the fact that cruise ships just keep getting bigger. I think the average cruise ship now holds like what, 1 million people?
Roughly. I
Yeah.
mean, 5,400 is kind of just about the ceiling on that, but that's actually not even the ceiling. That's not even with crew, and it's not even full capacity for the biggest ships. So yeah, it's an entire population of a small city floating into another city.
Yeah. It seems like you could solve this problem by just creating sort of fake Venices and then, don't tell the cruise ships, but, have them park at Venice and, most people won't know the difference. It'll be like, hey, look, this is a super clean, new, shiny feeling Venice. But, I think most cruise ship tourists might not notice the change.
What could possibly go wrong with that?
Um, so we've talked a bit about then how people can help address this problem through traveling smarter and more polite ways. That's super helpful. But what are local governments and sites doing to prevent the damage that over tourism is causing?
Yeah, so we've even seen some very popular areas just like close altogether. Um, I think it's Maya Beach in Thailand, which was kind of the non-Leonardo DiCaprio star of the movie The Beach. I really hope I'm getting that right because I think it was Leo, but I didn't see that movie.
It was definitely Leo.
It was Leo. Okay.
I was a gay teenager at the time, so yes, it was. I can verify.
It is definitely in my generational wheelhouse. So, um, yes. So, Maya Beach, that's just closed until further notice because it was just getting too trashed. Boracay Island in the Philippines closed for a while, and I believe they've reopened or they're about to reopen, but with very strict rules in place. And you see places like Rome and Venice issuing new rules for tourists just to try to keep things in check. Um, I mean, some of them sound kind of silly, like don't take off your shirt and don't like bathe in the fountains and stuff. But you can definitely see that there are kind of little efforts here and there being made. Um, from a bigger, I mean, from a bigger picture, there are countries that are like really trying to think about their tourism. What was usually the function of like a tourism board was to generate more visitors, but now they're thinking about it like, okay, how many visitors do we actually want? How can we accommodate them in the best way? How can we have the money, raise the money to take care of the structural issues that those tourists are going to bring? So some people are like adding visitor taxes. We saw that in New Zealand. I believe Iceland is doing something along those lines too. So the really thoughtful ones who are trying to address the problem before it gets out of control are considering all of the measures they can take in the long run as they're trying to grow visitor numbers. Yes, but they're also trying to think about how they're going to cope with those visitors in the next like 5, 10, 20 years.
And you turned me on to a phrase called dawning developers. Can you explain what that is?
Yes, so there was a study by the World Travel and Tourism Council, the WTTC, and they're kind of looking at the readiness of 50 destinations around the world. So they had some emerging performers, and then they had dawning developers, and there are all these terms. Uh, but there were a couple of the groups that seemed like they could be at risk of being like the next Amsterdam or the next Venice, um, which means that's actually, I believe, the emerging performers category. Basically, they're growing, they have a lot of tourism momentum. The warning flag they were waving was like, these cities are growing, they're seeing more tourists, there's some momentum. Um, but are they able to keep up with that, basically? So dawning developers was actually a category that um, seemed to be in decent shape because they were growing gradually and they have lower visitor concentrations. Those are places like Buenos Aires in Argentina and Bogota in Colombia. You've got Lima in Peru, Moscow, Rio, Riyadh, Mumbai. So those were places that still could grow according to this report, and be able to manage it. But then you had like these emerging performers that were at a little more risk of not being able to handle it. So that was like Mexico City, New Delhi, Cape Town, Bangkok, Ho Chi Minh City, Istanbul, Jakarta. I think that was everybody.
Yeah, I visited Mexico City a lot, and even in the 4 or 5 years I've been going, the amount of tourists has increased exponentially. It
Mm,
used to be that you would hear very little English when you were out on the town.
mhm.
And this is only like 4 years ago. And now when I go, I feel like I'm I might as well be in Brooklyn for the mix of languages that I get.
Wow.
It's sort of interesting just how quickly that can happen. And of course, Mexico City was named one of the top tourist destinations 2 years ago by I think it was Vogue or Vanity Fair, whoever writes those articles. And that obviously contributes to it some, but it is interesting to see a city that happened to a city sort of quickly.
Yeah.
And living in Bushwick, Brooklyn, which is a neighborhood that has gentrified in the 10 years that I've lived here, to put it mildly. But now we have just groups of 20 or 30 tourists who are just kind of clogging the sidewalks, looking at murals. And
Oh, yeah.
it's such a surreal thing to see because when I moved here 10 years ago, there were no tourists, and now there are groups of like European families, you know, taking scheduled tours to look at murals. So it's an interesting thing to see.
Yeah, I used to live in Miami, and there's a neighborhood within Miami called Wynwood that became kind of emerged as like a street art place, and so now it's kind of grown up a whole like there's breweries and restaurants everywhere,
Right.
but it was definitely a place where people were not going, um, much like Bushwick, where it was cheap for artists, and then the art started to draw the tourists, and now it's just you can't forget trying to park there.
We've gone beyond breweries. We have a cider house. We've got
Oh,
a local mead brewery. So
wow. Super Brooklyn.
very Brooklyn, absolutely. Um, so I'd love to just circle back. We were talking about the prevention of damage, and one thing my co-host Kiernan is huge on is the National Park Service, and
Mm,
he is worried that there will be uh, that some of the steps that we might take to alleviate over tourism, and especially in the national parks, might be to sort of raise ticket prices, and these things would make obviously we want the national parks to be available to everyone to be able to afford it. And are there ways that uh, that these sites can maybe deal with over tourism without having to make it just a matter of who can afford to go to these places?
yeah, and that's really a tough one because what you see, I'll get back to the national parks in a second, but what you see from a lot of the destinations themselves is a pivot to like, and this sounds not great, but to quality over quantity. Like they want higher spending tourists who are going to drop a lot more money over a longer period of
Right.
time, as opposed to just like a group of people staying in one place, not spending a lot. So there's definitely some like discriminatory behavior, and I'm not saying like in an illegal way, but in the way that they're thinking about who they want to be attracting to their countries. So when you think about something like the national parks, which is supposed to be, for everyone, um, yeah, it's tricky because they're getting really packed. Um, there are those infrastructural issues. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think there was a push to try to raise prices, but there was so much backlash um, that push they backed off of that a little bit,
Right.
if I'm remembering right. But then you see like, okay, maybe we're not going to charge more money, but maybe we're only going to let people into the parks with timed entries. So you would really have to be thinking in advance.
Right.
If you're going to go in the height of summer and say like, okay, I'm going to lock down this whatever 1 p.m. entry to whatever national park. I mean, I see that happening at non-national parks all over the world. So I can imagine that that's kind of in fashion for
Right.
attractions. Yeah.
Yeah, and the timed entry seems like it's already working at the 9/11 Memorial, and I know that Hudson Yards, I think it's the Vassal, what do they call that crazy thing they built there?
Well, I
Um,
called it the alien spaceship, but
yeah, well,
is
I
it the
thought I
vessel?
yeah, I thought it was an alien spaceship myself for years when I would walk by it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they do timed entry on that as well. So
Right.
and that seems to work okay as long again, you have to plan though. It can't be a spur of the moment. I want to go check out the alien spaceship in Hudson Yards. You've got
Right.
to Google it and figure all this out before. And to be a lot, I'm sure there are a lot of disappointed people who just imagine you can just go.
Yeah, I mean, I was I was after I moved, I went back for a weekend and I was like, oh, I meant to check this out before I left, so let me go see it. And I went online just to be like, oh, how do I get there? Or where do I go? And it was like, oh, I should have done this 3 weeks ago before I even knew I was coming to New York this weekend. And same, like I went to Acadia National Park last year, and luckily I was at an off-peak time, so I was there in October. But my husband and I were just like, okay, let's go to Cadillac Mountain for sunrise. Um, Not like we found out it was a thing while we were there,
Right, right,
and it was totally packed. And if they had been requiring people to have timed entry, we would have been like turned away at the top of a mountain at 4:30 a.m. So it really does take away some of that like spontaneity and some of the joy of discovery while you're in travel has to give way to a little more planning when you're talking about stuff like this.
And this is why I've been to San Francisco like 20 times and never been able to see Alcatraz because I'm always like, oh, there'll be a time I can go, and then of course, when I get there, it's like, oh no, it's booked for a month. So
Got to be the planner now.
exactly. Well, at the risk of causing more over tourism, are there any places that you've been that you think don't reflect this yet? Are places that you can go and enjoy and haven't are not having a problem with over tourism that you'd recommend?
Well, I mean, this is pretty far to go, but I did go to New Zealand a few years ago for my honeymoon, and it was glorious. There were some places where there were a lot of people like Hobbiton.
Yeah, I have a friend who did like some sort of Lord of the Rings tour in New Zealand.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
did that too. A lot of it was just like parks where there were where scenes had been shot, and that wasn't busy at all. But then we went to like the land where um, you know, where the hobbits lived in the movie.
Right.
And it was adorable and very well run and managed. There were a lot of people there, but then we stayed on a farm in that town and we fed some sheep and we ate with the people who owned the home, and it was wonderful. It was wonderful. It wasn't overrun in any way. We met a lot of wonderful people who lived there, and we really loved it. So if you can stomach the very long plane ride, I highly recommend that as a place that's not too overwhelmed yet.
Did you read that I don't know if it was a great story, that entertaining story about that family that was terrorizing New Zealand?
Oh, I couldn't even. It made me so sad. Just to even see the headlines. It's
Yeah.
like, no, beloved, beautiful New Zealand.
One family can cause that much damage.
Right. I mean, it's no. I don't think it is what sparked the visitor fees there, but it certainly made it sound like those fees were a good idea.
Well, look, Hannah, thank you so much for joining us and taking some of your afternoon to discuss over tourism. And we're going to link to your Twitter in the show notes so folks can follow you and keep up with your fantastic reporting at the Washington Post.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, folks, it's time for the last stop.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last stop on this train. Everyone, please leave the train.
Well, Kieran, here we are. We are back.
Ryan, you are just taking leaps forward as an interviewer. Great interview, fascinating topic.
Thank you.
And really, it made me scared. I mean, it made me scared for the future of travel and tourism.
But I hope it also left you hopeful.
Nope, just scared. No.
Yeah, it didn't leave me very hopeful either.
Well, I mean, I'm interested to see how, and actually, I'd be really interested to be a part of figuring out how regulations, countries, popular areas figure out how to be both fair, but also be conscious of not destroying what is so special about the places that are being over touristed.
And also remember how tourists like ourselves and our listeners can be better tourists and not contribute as much to over tourism.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, Ryan, we're here in the last stop. We shouldn't just keep recapping the interview. We're here in the last stop, which is a special segment. It's the final segment of this show, of every show. It's your favorite segment. It's my favorite segment. It's popularly known as the People segment. It's a moment to meditate on the week and to think about something that we've read or thought or bought or did or ate or cooked or bought. Anything that's fed the spirit of wanderlust within us, even during the workday week. So this is where I would usually say, Ryan, did you bring a last stop this week? But I'm going to tell you, this week, I'm going to go first.
You're going to go first?
I'm going to go first.
Wow.
Because I have an over tourism related last stop. Did you see this article in the New York Times about komodo dragons?
I did not, but I love komodo dragons.
So komodo dragons, if you love them, you should be a little nervous because their habitat is starting to become over touristed.
What?
So they famously live on this chain of islands that is part of Indonesia. Indonesia, a huge island nation, thousands of islands. I've actually been to Indonesia, but I did not go to the area where there are komodo dragons. There is now a Komodo National Park that is welcoming tourists in to to interact with the dragons. But it's become so popular, and that even cruise ships are pulling up and just disgorging massive amounts of tourists. And the Komodo dragons are starting to become less themselves. And it comes down to, for example, the rangers are feeding them off the back of trucks. They're not even hunting like they used to, and they're trying to like fatten up the Komodo dragons so that they'll be more docile and folks can get great Instagrams. I mean, that's not good.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's bad. And so there's a big pull between those who live around the Komodo National Park are suggesting that perhaps they need to stop bringing in these huge ships that let off all these passengers, or they need to actually close off the park for a year to let the ecosystem readjust without so many people there. And that would be their suggestion as to how to solve this issue.
But you would need to, after that year, have some kind of something else to sort of step it back, not just
Yeah.
open the doors again and just let gazillion people run
Right.
in.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's about
Yeah.
finding a balance, right? And
Yeah.
what was interesting in this article is something I didn't know. In Thailand, they actually did close off a beach that was getting threatened. All the coral was dying along this beach. It was called Maya Beach. And the beach has been closed for a year. And already they're seeing coral grow back. They're seeing sharks come back in the water. So, I mean, humans really are a lot of the problem.
That is quite the mea culpa.
Sorry, I just needed a moment to recover from that. Especially on last week's episode, you accused me of dad jokes, and then you proudly come on laughing at your own jokes there. But what's difficult is that the people who live around Komodo National Park, they make their living off the popularity of the park. So, of course, they want it to be more and more popular. But the whole point is there's going to be nothing to show to live off of
Right.
if it gets over touristed. So is there a way to regulate it in such a way that you can still make money and a living off it, but you're not going to ruin it in the meantime?
Yeah, I think that is obviously the challenge that all these areas that we discussed today are dealing with.
But
And some countries are going to be more aggressive at actually dealing with the problem, and some are so excited they have tourist dollars that they're just going to let it be overrun. And
I
it's
mean, this
it's
is
a real-
where Bhutan is such an interesting example, and longtime listeners will remember we have a great episode back on Bhutan.
one of the most popular episodes, I think.
Extremely popular. Thank you for mentioning that. If you didn't, I would have. And what they do is they set a required daily spend that is so high
Yeah.
that it is basically prohibitively expensive.
Right.
And
But we don't think that's a real solution. I mean, that's not fair. That's not equitable.
it's not fair, but it is one approach.
Right. So it's like the Mar-a-Lago approach.
I mean, well, you wonder whether you couldn't do that, but maybe reserve a certain number of spots to go to a popular lottery or
Like
something
the Hamilton
that.
lottery. You could just
Exactly,
approach it
like the
Hamilton.
Hamilton lottery. And
People
if you
get to see
can't make
Hamilton
it,
or- yeah.
they'll just walk a Komodo dragon in front of a video camera on YouTube.
So the only people can go are like the mega elites, and then a bunch of college kids who can wait all day and for luck at a ticket.
As
It'll be-
yeah, exactly. I like that you suggest that you can't do that. All right. Well, we'll leave you with that unexpected Komodo dragon Hamilton comparison. Komodo dragon. So Ryan, I have to ask, what's your last stop?
So my last stop also inspired by a little newspaper called the New York Times.
Oh.
There was an article in the Times on this new sort of medical tourism, and what used to happen was if you wanted to travel to a foreign country to save money on an operation or a procedure, you would do that. But now there are actually these organizations that are pairing you with doctors from the United States, so you and your doctor can both travel to the country to have the surgery together, and they
Like the doctor's getting surgery as well?
no, the doctor's doing the surgery.
Sure.
You know?
Oh, okay. Do
So
you get to do surgery on your doctor as well?
I mean, it is. I mean, the regulations there are probably way less. So if you wanted to,
So
I
it's
don't
just
see why not.
expanded medical tour. It's kind of like medical tourism paired with like dating.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Again, I think that your relationship with your doctor is going to maintain. It's going to be fairly professional. Even though you're in Cancun together, it's not a
Yeah,
vacation.
I don't know.
you
It
know?
can be very romantic on vacation.
But when you get your hip replaced, you don't feel up to the romance, Although I feel like Cancun's a great place to just go and lay around and do nothing after you've gotten your hip replaced.
Yeah. Also, you don't know what people's sexual proclivities are. Maybe that really gets a doctor going.
Look, I'm never one to kink shame or slut shame. I don't play those games.
I
I'm
mean,
not,
genitals are directly adjacent to hips. So, while you're already down there, you're in a faraway place. I think it sounds beautiful.
Look, all I know is that this gentleman, the doctor who flew down to do this operation, he was only in Cancun for 24 hours.
So that wasn't hypothetical. It was actually in Cancun?
Yeah, it was actually in Cancun. Only
brother.
there for 24 hours, does the surgery, flies back, gets paid 3 times as much to do the surgery in Cancun than he would get for Medicare disbursement here in the United States.
That's
so
insane.
good for his pocketbook and good for this woman who saved on the hospital bills, the overnight costs. You save on all these different things. It's much cheaper to do this, even though you're flying your doctor down to another country.
Boy, this seems like an ad for Mexico tourism just waiting to happen. You bring your doctor, your kids.
Yeah.
You can get all the elective surgeries you want.
Well, when I get my abs installed, this is one of the ways I'm going to consider doing it.
How many are you getting? You're
8-pack.
an 8-pack.
Yeah.
Wow,
I want
that's going to
people-
be beautiful.
I'm going to go for it. I'm going to go
a full ocho, as
I'm
they
going to go
call
from
it.
I'm going to go from the Homer Simpson body to the Brad Pitt and Fight Club body overnight.
Oh, come on. Now, Ryan, Homer Simpson had some hair. That's not
Oh,
fair.
this is slander, libel. It's everything. It's everything.
All right, Ryan. Well, that medical tourism, very fascinating. Actually, now that we've covered over tourism, medical tourism may well be a follow-up.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, what are we talking about next week?
Next week we're talking about. It's funny we've chatted a little bit about it on the show this time. We're talking about Alexander Hamilton's New York.
So this is going to be places when you're in New York to visit, to learn about Alexander Hamilton's life and work. And if you can get a ticket to Hamilton, great. I'm sure we'll include that. But
Yeah.
we're not guaranteeing you a ticket.
No, but anyone who listens will get a free ticket to Hamilton.
No, no.
No, we can't say that?
No, you can't. No. They're not a sponsor yet.
Asterisk, if you send us $1,000 or something.
Or you could just subscribe to the Ham Fam or whatever they call it. What do they call it?
The Fan Ham. We'll talk about that on the pod, and we'll talk a bit about like you said, Alexander Hamilton, the historical figure, but also some of the cool Hamilton the musical stuff in New York, like where they rehearsed, where you might be able to bump into Lin-Manuel, all sorts of things like that. So it's going to be an episode of both the history and the contemporary Hamilton.
I'm enticed already.
Well, until then, Kieran, I'm Ryan Davis.
You teased it already, and I'm Kieran Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
Is he taken? Would you get a picture with a Komodo dragon?
Yes, I would.
Really?
I would absolutely, yeah.
Oh, I'd be too afraid. They got venom on their teeth.
Yeah, now they're all fat and docile, though. They're like, they're like Midwesterners.